We got our one node camera set up working well. You can see it zooming in, actually get some nice separation out from our different layers. Now we're going to turn this into a two node camera. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to switch back to our two view layout. Our left view and our active camera view. And now we want to change this one node camera into a two node camera. So first thing we want to do is select your camera. You need to go up to Layer, Camera Settings, and then just switch it to two node camera and click OK. And you'll see a point of interest property will show up down here. You also get the little crosshair here. Okay. As I was saying in the previous video, what the point of interest does is it just changes where that camera's focused on without you having to use the rotation property, which is very helpful if you want to shoot from different angles. So let me just pull it around. You can see that I'm not moving my camera at all. I'm just moving my point of interest, and you can see how it changes the angle here. Also, if I move my camera, let me zoom in a little bit more. Up, down, you can see that it automatically makes the camera tilt to that direction. So it can be very helpful to use, but in most cases, it's not completely necessary, especially when you're working with just 2D layers in 3D space. One case that we can use it for is we can make a big Dolly Crane shot out of this by starting up higher and then swooping down low and zooming in at the same time. Okay. To do that, what you want to do is you want to move your playhead to your first keyframe, and then you want to grab your camera. And you want to do this by grabbing from inside the camera, not on these handles here. Because if you grab the handles, it's actually going to move the point of interest with it. Which is one of the reasons that I try to steer beginner animation students away from using the two-node camera, because it can get a little bit confusing to know where to grab it and where not to grab it, and also how it works. And it also, if you get too close to it, it makes your camera spin around and go all crazy sometimes. But what you want to do is you want to place your cursor inside of this pink box and just click and drag up. And just find a pretty good angle for it. Now, it doesn't have to be really high, it can just be a little bit high. And then you're going to go forward just a little bit so that you don't see the edges of your building. So about like that. Good. Now, when we go forward, you know, it's kind of an interesting movement, but it's very even looking. What we would like more is we would like for it to swoop down a little bit more. So the nice thing about cameras is you can handle them, their position property like a position property of any other layer. You can actually, they've got built-in motion guides on them, and you can actually bend those motion guides. So go ahead and select the points of your motion guide and pull those handles out that you see right here. If you're having trouble seeing the handles, you can also grab your, shows up for me, Convert Vertex tool, which is grouped with your pen tool. You can actually click and drag on the points to pull them out. Just want to make it so that it's going to swoop down a little bit more, and that's going to give you a much more interesting look. Might also help if we apply some easing to this, do a bit of easy ease on it. And now we're getting a much more interesting movement out of it. So it goes down first and then zooms in. Now, the downside of this is these are 2D layers, and they look like 2D layers a little bit here, especially since they're kind of splaying out like this. It's what's called keystoning. It's when a 2D object rotates in 3D space and it looks like a 2D object in 3D space like this. It's bizarre. Luckily, After Effects has a little bit of a fix for this, which works in most situations, but you got to be careful that you don't put your camera too close to your layers when you do this. What it's going to do is it's going to allow the layers to automatically orient to the camera. So they rotate with the view of the camera, so they always look like they're upright. Okay. To do this, we're going to select our 4 Illustrator layers that have been put in 3D space. We don't need our street and sidewalk to bend with it, because they're sort of a 3D object anyway. It's almost like we made a box out of them. But these ones are very 2D, and they're showing off that they're 2D by tilting forward like this. So select those 4 layers: cars, tables, front building, and back building. Then you go to your layer menu, choose Transform, Auto Orient, or Command Option O if you want to use the hotkey. This can also be used to orient along a path, which means that if you move an object and you have kind of a wiggly path for it, it'll actually rotate with the path. But what we want to do is we want to orient it towards the camera. So with all 4 of those layers selected and this turned on, what it'll do is it'll cause all of them to kind of tilt towards your camera. You can kind of see them tilting back a little bit now. You got to be really careful with this because you don't want them to tilt too much. Like, you can't go with a really high angle. It's going to look silly if they all flatten out on the sidewalk and then pull back up as you're moving the camera around. But if it's just a subtle camera movement, then it tends to work really well. And now what you'll get is, let me switch back to one view, a very nice looking dolly shot. I'm going to do full screen on this. Make sure all my layers are deselected. So there you go. That would be our nice parallax movement that we've created. We looked at how to do it with both a 1-node camera and a 2-node camera. Now remember, it's usually best to just use a 1-node camera when you're doing this effect. It's a lot easier to control. If you're just zooming in, or if you're moving the camera along your thing, maybe you've got a character walking, you have the camera following the person walking, the background moving behind them, then you would only need a 1-node camera for that. The only time you would need a 2-node camera is if you wanted to go with a higher angle like this, or if you wanted to start off a little bit to the side and then shift to the front. But usually you don't need to do that. Usually the 1-node camera will work fine.